Now that I have cut the cover down, I'm going to use some decorative papers to decorate the outside of the cover. So I've selected a couple different papers here, the red, and then there's some red in this marbled paper that I'd like to use, but I don't want to use all of it. Like, that's kind of a yucky spot. I don't want that on my artwork. And I don't like that green on the edges either. So how am I going to get that off of there? Well, you can use the paper cutters. They look sort of like this. All you have to do to use these, they're not going to give you an exact cut, but they will give you a pretty darn close cut. You just have to slide the paper underneath it, and you're going to line the edges of the paper, the top edge, in order to have a perpendicular cut. Line it up with that guideline, and then you just push down and slide forward, and it will cut off the paper. Okay, your hands will never be in the way if you do that. So I'm going to slide this around, cut off this part, and I want it to be perpendicular, so I'm going to line it up with that guideline again. Okay, like I said, it's not cutting it exactly even, so I have to fix that, but it's pretty straight. So this, I think I want it to be on my book cover. A little bit of that brown might show. Otherwise, though, it's pretty good. So I don't think I'm going to use that part of it. I might just use this part right here, or maybe have a little bit smaller piece. Oh, it's going to show. Oh, well. So I have a little bit of that showing. No big deal. All right. Now what I'm going to do is glue down pieces from my cover. So if I know that this is going to wrap around the edge of the book and I want it to show sort of like there on the book, and I want this part to be red, I'm going to cover the front and back covers with the plain red paper first, and then cut a piece that I want to be for the spine later, and that'll kind of overlap and cover up that edge. It's not a good idea to try to make it exactly meet, because you're always going to have a little bit of room where it doesn't exactly meet perfectly. If that does happen, it's not that big of a deal. You can use some thread or ribbon, not thread, but ribbon or paper to cover that part up. So I'm going to take the paper, and I think I'm going to do the back cover first. And I'm going to lay the book cover down on top of my paper. I want to make sure that I have enough paper on all three sides so that I can fold it over eventually. I can fold that in, and so there's about an inch or so all the way around. So to make that, because I have some extra paper here, to make that look right, I can take a pen or a pencil. I'm lining up the first fold with the edge of the paper down here, just so that I have a nice straight line there. And I want that, so I'm going to come down here and sketch out a little line about an inch away from the edge, and maybe right through here as well. Okay. I'm going to also trace the actual edges of my book so I know where to glue it. Then all you have to do, use your handy dandy scissors and chop off the unwanted bits. While you have this here, you're going to take your scissors and you're going to trim just, oops, see if you can see it, just the tip of that corner off. So you notice how it's not all the way up to the line like that. You only want just the tip of it, and you're going to trim just the tip of that corner off. You're going to also do that with the other corner. So now I have something that looks like that. In order to glue this down, I find it easiest to use a glue stick. But if the glue stick is not holding it, sometimes if your paper is really thick, it doesn't stick down well enough, so you're going to have to use a thicker glue. And if that is the case, let me know and I will assist you. Okay, so in order to glue it down, I want to make sure that this paper goes on the outside of the book. So if I look at how this is folded, this little tent part that's folded there, I want the paper to be glued on the outside of the book, not the inside. So I want to make sure wherever this is folded, that those folded parts are kind of face down, and I'm looking at the edges of the book when I lay this down on top. whenever you glue it. So you don't want to do this and glue it to the inside of the book. That's not how it goes. It goes like that. If you have a pattern paper for this part and it's not red on both sides like mine or one color on both sides, you want the pretty side down towards the table and the ugly side up. So the back side of your paper that you did this line on should be facing up. So if it was white on one side and pretty on the other, for example, this has a pattern on one side and is plain on the other, I would want to trace my lines and do all the tracing on the back of it. Okay. What I'm going to do now is flip my book cover over so that you have a mountain fold, and I'm going to apply glue stick, a lot of glue stick. And when I get to the edges, you notice how I have my paper underneath? That way if I go off, I'm not going onto the table. I'm going on to where I'm going to put glue anyway. You need to work kind of quickly. You want your glue stick to be from the center and kind of do from the center out motions. If you do get a big chunk of glue like that, you want to make sure that you kind of scrape it flat with the tip of your glue stick so that it doesn't leave a bubble in your paper. So get it nice and gluey. Make sure you go all the way out to the edges wherever the paper is going to cover. I'm not going to worry about this area making it perfect because I know I have another piece going over that. So I'm going to flip this around. Make sure I get glue all the way out to the edges. This glue stick that I have here is purple and then it turns clear whenever it starts to dry. Yours may not do that, but you still want to make sure you work quick enough to where the glue doesn't dry before you get a chance to stick it down. So I'm going to turn this over, glue side down, line up the corner with that corner. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it should be pretty close. And I'm going to stick that down. So I'm going to use my hand and just kind of rub it flat. Then to make sure that it doesn't wrinkle, I'm going to flip the whole shebang over. So now I'm looking at the outside of the book. I'm going to lay it flat and I'm going to take one hand and hold it flat and the other hand and push down from the center to the edges. This will help stretch the paper just in case there was a lot of glue, if there's a lot of moisture, or if you had a thick paper. This, I'm using the palm of my hand here, holding the paper with this hand so it doesn't move, and pushing from the center out, trying to stretch that paper out and make sure it sticks down really well, all the way out to the edges. So what you have when you're finished is your paper stuck to the outside of your book cover. If you have a little bit like that kind of sticking out on the edges, if you're very careful, you can trim that up. Just be super careful that you're only cutting off the paper and you're not cutting through the fold of the file folder, because you don't want to have a slit in your book. So you can trim up that little extra bit if you ended up with some. Okay, so you'll repeat the same process, gluing it down onto the other side. You'll have a little gap right here in the middle where the spine is. So if I look at the front of the outside of the book cover, you'll have a little gap right here. That would be where I would use my pretty paper and I would glue that in a strip over it so that they overlap. That way when I would close my book, the front cover of the book would probably be lined up a little bit better. You know, you'd see a little bit of that on the spine or on the front of the book and a little bit on the back, and then that would be also on the spine of the book. So that's one way to do it. If you have to piece it together for multiple pieces. If you just have one big piece of paper, it's okay to trace your whole, and like lay the cover out flat, lay your paper ugly side up on the table, and then lay your file folder over it, trace around it, and do the same process with the corners, and make sure you still have the edges, but you don't have to leave a gap. So if you're using just one big sheet of paper and you're not piecing it together like that, it's okay to do the whole thing at once. You don't have to cut your paper.